Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the Football Friday podcast. Yes, we are back after a little bit of a hiatus. I'm back from my wedding and honeymoon, and Alex Kazora joins me this week. He's back from the hiatus as well. Alex, what's happening?
Yeah, not back from my wedding and honeymoon, but you are. Congratulations, Matt. It was a beautiful wedding, and I'm glad you had a good time out in Hawaii.
Thank you. Same with you, Alex. It was good to have you as one of my groomsmen, one of my 6 groomsmen, and Ian Hunter, who's unable to join us this week, was a part of the bridal party as well. We had a lot of fun. It was a good time. I think the limo ride was pretty epic. Everyone saw the photo I tweeted out as well and tagged the podcast in it as well. D-Jock was there too, Tyler DiGiacomo. He had a good time. He's not able to join us this week either. Hopefully we'll have them both back in the next episode. And I can't go out by saying I'd be remiss if I didn't go over just a couple notes from my trip to Hawaii, including my favorite part, at least, Aloha Stadium. And Alex, I've already bored you with those details, so I'm going to do that again very quickly because we have a lot to get to that's happened in this past week or so. Not to mention the other stuff that we missed. But yeah, Aloha Stadium it's an older type. It's an older stadium. I guess it was a little bit older than I thought. I don't know why I was expecting it to be new, but 50,000 seated stadium. I can tell you one thing: it was really hot. And I know when you've watched the Pro Bowls in the past where you see the guys, constantly by the fans and stuff like that, you understand because it was very, very hot there in the middle because we were there right in the middle of the afternoon when they would play. We got the best part of it was playing on the field, and that's how we got down there. So, yeah, I was throwing the football around, and I taught my wife a couple of routes, and she ran a perfect slam route. I hit her for a touchdown pass, and she held the football for me. She was kind of scared. She was first going to kick her finger, but I didn't do it. I kicked a 15-yard field goal. So, yeah, it was a good time. I was in my glory days, all my glory there. Candy store.
Goodness. Oh, 2 things. I told you this before, poor your wife for running routes on her honeymoon. I'm sure that is just was never in a girl's plan. Like when she made up her wedding day and her honeymoon as a kid, it was never, I want to run routes for my husband. And only you, Matt Catrillo, could have a beautiful wife and start a new life and have a honeymoon and say the best thing about that whole part was going to an empty football stadium. That poor girl. Apparently, she was not the best part of the honeymoon. Apparently, it was an empty stadium where you got to throw a football in. So that's just, I feel for her.
Of course, being with her is always the best part, and I know
you're backtracking, now you're moonwalking.
Well, no, but I have the picture to prove it because I tweeted this out as well, and the exact quote was, "I knew I married the right woman because." This was not my idea. I had a lot of ideas that day when we were at Aloha Stadium, but this was her idea. Was that picture that I tweeted out on Twitter of us with our rings on that football? That was entirely her idea. I just want to make that clear. So,
well, kudos to her. But she is going, I did not marry the right man. I am regretting this immediely. So I feel for her.
You, who I'll just call the king of football X's and O's. You want to make your wife run routes on your honeymoon if you had the opportunity?
No, I honestly would not. No. I love football, but I would never torture my wife like that. Never, ever.
I'm actually a little bit surprised by that.
Okay, you shouldn't be. You don't know me well enough, apparently. I would never, ever, and I feel so bad that your wife is having to go through boot camp with Matt Catrillo.
Well, it was a great time in Hawaii. It's such a beautiful place. Like you literally feel like you were in like some sort of painting or something with seeing the mountains in the back and the blue water, the palm trees, the whole 9 yards. I mean, it's just an incredible place to go. If you haven't been there, do it. And maybe hopefully the Pro Bowl will be back. Maybe in 2019 it's in Orlando again this year, and they said they can bid for it after that. And they might even have a new stadium too. There's talks with the state of Hawaii, who actually owns the Aloha Stadium, that they might build a 35,000 seated stadium to try and maybe sweeten the pot for the NFL to come back. But we'll see. It's still kind of in the works a little bit there.
It needs to come back to Hawaii. I don't have many Pro Bowl takes, but that's one of them.
All right, I love that. Great, yeah. That's perfect. I think we'll end it right there. That's perfect.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, and the show or in the topic, I'm okay with either.
Yes, there we go. All right, so let's get back to what we missed, Alex, and recap, especially what's happened this week, and in particular the last couple of days. The July 17th deadline has passed for teams to sign players to long-term deals, and of course Le'Veon Bell was involved as one of those players, and he goes unsigned, and he will most likely sign a $12 million tender but he still is currently unsigned at the moment. He's got a lot of Steeler fans at angst, and I know you've been trying to calm the masses a little bit there. The Steelers apparently offered Bell an average of $12 million a year, $30 million of it in the first 2 years, $42 million over 3 years. That was according to Tom Pelissero, who I know, Alex, you quoted as well in your story on Steelers Depot yesterday. I'm a little bit surprised by that because he's basically, if we're talking $12 million per year, and of course he's getting that amount of money in the first 2 years and $30 mil, really, actually, the $42 million over 3 years, it kind of seems to me like that would have been a no-brainer for him, no? Or what were your thoughts on him turning down that deal?
Well, it's up to the player, and if he feels like he's worth more, and obviously he does, and he said as much to ESPN, then, more power to you. You don't have to accept the deal, and we don't know every particular of the contract. The Steelers are generally light on guaranteed money, and that may have been a bit of a sticking point as well. But, based on the reports that are out there and the agents that have, know this stuff in and out, they say it's a very fair deal, and that's kind of my thought, too, that the Steelers made a competitive offer. And both sides negotiated in good faith, but Bell just thought he was worth more. It's not a Washington situation where Washington did not act in good faith, did not make a competitive offer, and then publicly essentially smeared Kirk Cousins and tried to get the bad press onto him. It's a different situation. Having said that, I said about this on Steelers Depot on Thursday. Or Wednesday, excuse me, that I think the only option for Pittsburgh going forward after this year is the franchise tag, because I don't believe the Steelers' offer is going to get any better, or at least not significantly better. I think what they offered, if that's true, which I assume that it is as good as it gets from Pittsburgh, and obviously that's not good enough for Le'Veon Bell. So unless there's an injury or something off the field of play, Bell's going to want whatever he wants, which is more than what Pittsburgh's offering him. So the only option for the Steelers now to retain Le'Veon Bell is to franchise tag him next year. It'll go for over $14 million. And will Bell be happy with that? No. And could he threaten a holdout? He could, like Eric Berry did this past year. So it's a mess going forward.
No question about that. I mean, if he turns down this type of a deal, I think he's kidding himself if he thinks he's worth more than that, because you just look at the role of the running back now in today's NFL. It's just not as valuable as it was, several years ago. And yes, he's a great player. I think he is one of the best, if not the best, back in the league. But if he's looking for more money, I think this is probably the best offer he's going to get. And obviously, that, as you mentioned, I agree, that's the best offer that the Steelers are going to give him. So if I'm Le'Veon Bell, I take that deal, because if not, I think he's kidding himself, honestly.
Well, I think it's the best he'll get from Pittsburgh, but I think if he were to ever hit the open market, he'll get more money because of the way the market works. Every 10 teams going after him, that price is going to go up. So, I mean, Pittsburgh's generally kind of conservative in this. They're not going to, throw crazy amount of money at any player. So if Pittsburgh, without competing against anybody, will offer him this pretty competitive deal, then I think he'll get more on the open market. But Pittsburgh made a very fair offer. It would have made him head and shoulders the highest paid back in the league. Bell says he wants to reset the market for backs, and, well, apparently he does.
I mean, like I said, he is the best, but I think where it's trending is that obviously NFL teams don't really value running back as much anymore. I mean, it's still an important part of the game, but it's just not, I guess, as valued as it was in the past. So I don't even know if I really, I might even question. I think Steeler fans have the right, Alex, to maybe question his future, as early as next year, is because if he hits the open market and the Steelers can't franchise him, then he's definitely gone next year, I think.
Well, they can't franchise him. I think that they will. It's just what happens from there. Bell's not going to be happy with that. No one likes the tag. Teams don't like the tag. Players don't like the tag. But, so, if Bell's upset with that and says, I want a long-term deal, I don't know if a long-term deal could get hammered out. So I think it's just going to be a really tricky situation going forward.
And another tricky situation, Alex, that is now starting to develop possibly is Alejandro Villanueva on the offensive line for Pittsburgh, who reportedly may not report to training camp either on time, as he is pursuing a new contract, and rightfully so. I think he's making, only $500K, something like that, if I have that correct, Alex? So
mid-low.
Yeah, and he's developed into one of the best left tackles in the league. So he's definitely right there. But you tweeted this out yesterday, and I totally agree, is Pittsburgh doesn't deal with holdouts well. If you hold out, it's not going to end in your favor. Perfect example, and you mentioned that was Hines Ward and how that all fell out. And I think, and you tie this back to Bell, it's in the best interest for both players to get themselves to camp and then try and work things out from there. I think especially for Alejandro Villanueva and what he's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I want Villanueva to get a long-term deal done, and hopefully it gets done before camp. We avoid this issue entirely. I'm betting the Steelers are going to pursue that and try to get a deal done right before camp opens. But if it doesn't happen, holding out in other cities it might work, but in Pittsburgh they're not going to negotiate with you. So if you want a long-term deal and if you want to talk to the team, holding out is the last thing that you want to do. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Villanueva to do so. For Bell, it makes even less sense because it's not even a real holdout because you can't get more money. The team can't negotiate with you anymore by CBA, NFL rules. So, he has the right to not sign the tender. He is not under contract right now. Neither is Villanueva, for that matter. Neither have signed their tenders. So, I mean, they have the right to do it without being fined or punished. But in Bell's case, he missed the entire spring. Ben was already frustrated with you for doing that. Are you going to miss almost all of camp again and not be with your team and start to come together as a team so you can all begin the journey of going to win a Super Bowl, to mentor James Conner and the rest of the running backs? And when I say mentor, it's not to show them how to be a good guy, make good decisions. It's about watching tape, letting Conner pick your brain of, what are you seeing, and working through those things, talking on the sidelines, talking in meetings. It's all those little things as well. You show that you really, want to be a team guy. So I hope Bell shows up for camp day one, but based on reports right now, that does not look too likely.
And what you mentioned a second ago about Bell and Big Ben not being happy with Bell not being in camp during the spring leads me to my next question, is with the possibility of both Bell and Villanueva as possible holdouts for training camp, how do you think this is going to hurt the Steelers overall, both on and off the field, just by those relationships alone, and from an on-the-field perspective of just redeveloping that continuity again?
I don't know if it's the end of the world. Villanueva's got enough experience now, and Bell's right, and he said it. He doesn't need personally a lot of reps to get back into shape. But the thing with Bell too is that he's going to be limited in camp. It's not like he was going to go through the rigors of camp and be getting 20 carries of each practice in Latrobe and get beat up and all that. That's not going to happen. I mean, coming off the groin surgery that he had, my solution for this is have Bell sit out the first 2 weeks, attend camp, and sit out, not practice at all, so there's no injury risk. But he's still with his team. He's still, working with the guys, talking with Connor and the rest of the group, and picking their brains and being a teammate. And then you get him some work in the third game, and then you shut him down from there. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's not going to help, and it's just going to create that distraction and just those questions when now is the time to focus on football and coming together and really tighten the screws so you can go out there week one and beat Cleveland. And all this other stuff about contracts and holdouts and future, it's just a mess that players and coaches don't want to have to deal with so early on.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's one thing when you look, and now of course from an on-the-field standpoint for Bell, if you're a Steeler fan, you would of course want to see him on the field day one training camp, getting his reps, et cetera, et cetera. But when you throw the injury factor in there, he's coming off the groin injury, as you mentioned, Alex. I think that'd be a perfect plan for him. And I think what's going to happen with Pittsburgh is if you don't have Villanueva and or Bell at camp right away because they're holding out for their contracts, if I'm a Steeler fan, I'm more worried about the relationship off field in the locker room factor of possibly maybe derailing this, I'll say, for lack of a better words, sort of, than I would be for on-the-field type of things. As you mentioned, Villanueva's been there for a couple of years, and obviously Bell doesn't need that many reps either. So, like I said before, that would work. But what happened between Big Ben and Bell during the spring, and if Bell doesn't show up, that would begin to worry me a little bit. Because then once you have those relationships that take a hit, so to speak, and it's so early, as you mentioned, into the season, that would have me worried just a little bit as far as locker room goes.
I don't want to go too far with it and say, it'll be fine once Bell gets back, and Bell will report by sometime at least in training camp. He's not at risk for not being there week one. Villanueva is a separate issue. I don't think there'll be any off-the-field issue because everyone knows Villanueva is vastly underpaid and deserves a contract, and I think everyone would get that. I think Bell's situation is harder for players to understand because there is no business financial aspect at play because Bell cannot get any more money, any new money. So It's going to be a distraction, and I think it's going to be some frustration. Sure, I don't know. Derailing those is too harsh of a word to use.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like I said, lack of a better word there.
Yeah.
But what I'm just saying is, you don't want to have any relationship showing any sort of strain, especially between two of your three best players. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Villanueva sure would show some frustration as well if he's not there, but the guys know he's a good guy, and as we talked about, we agree he's vastly underpaid, and he should try to get that contract. But when you have guys like Bell and Ben that are two of your best three players that have maybe a little bit of a strained relationship to start the season, that's what I'm saying is not a good dynamic to start off.
No, I hear you. And the same with you're going to have the Ben and Martavis Bryant stuff now, because I don't know if you saw all that about Bryant unhappy with Ben. They have to have a man-to-man talk. I mean, there's just so much junk already happening before camp that's just unnecessary. When we start camp, and it's time to go work as a team to go win a Super Bowl.
Right, absolutely. And you hope that once you get on the field, a lot of teams out, so when we're going to be talking about later on in the show, I think are just ready to get themselves into camp and get on the field and be done with the offseason when you really think about this as a whole.
Sure.
And so let's move on to that. But before we get to some of those issues, first I got to mention and talk about Doug Peterson and what he said during a CSN Philly interview.
This is a very dumb topic. I'm gonna be upfront about this.
Okay.
But go ahead.
But he, for those that missed it, Doug Peterson said during a CSN Philly interview this past week that this team, this Eagles upcoming team, is, quote, probably more talented than the Packers teams in the 90s, which, of course, he was a part of and that won a Super Bowl. My only question is, why? Why say it? Why bring this conversation up, which I agree is stupid, but the fact that, I mean, you already know, you already have some transgressions against you as a head coach based on in-game decisions, play calling, etc. You know you have other issues defensively that will probably hurt you this year. We know that the offense is still going to be better, but there's still a lot of question marks about this Eagles team, and I'm sure he has to know that based on what transpired last year. So then, why would you say something like that? I get...
Because he's a coach. It's the offseason. You're just being optimistic and, saying...
But this is a little too far, though, don't you think?
Who cares? Does it change anything? Does it hurt the team at all?
I mean, it's not...
The answer is no. Doesn't change. Does it change Carson Wentz's approach? Oh man, we got to be the Packers now.
No, but there's still that expectation that's still there. Which I mean, I agree. I think the Eagles need to be held to that expectation that they should improve in for Carson Wentz, etc. But I mean, this is just stuff where it's kind of like some of what we were talking about with the Steelers is it's unnecessary. It's an unnecessary distraction. Then just don't put it out there. If you want to install that confidence in your team, this is the stuff you keep in the locker room. This is stuff you don't put outside the media because of this. A very minor distraction.
Are people really losing their minds? Maybe I'm pegging the Philadelphia media wrong. Are people really going crazy over a very coach speak optimistic statement?
It's more of an annoyance. Like, why would you say something like that? Because he really does look stupid and trying to compare this Eagles team, which is far from being a Super Bowl contender, to the team that he was on with that Packers team in the 90s. Let's not forget who was on that team. Reggie White, Brett Favre were ready to start.
Well aware, but why? Hope springs eternal in July right now. Be optimistic about your team. He's not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl like the Packers, though I'm sure that's what his expectation is, but he's just saying that they're talented. On paper, they have the ability to go far. Wouldn't you want your coach to say that? Do you want your coach to say, yeah, let's say
yes, I do want him, and I am optimistic for the Eagles about this season. I'm on the fence about playoffs at this point, but I'm optimistic in the fact that they will be a better football team than they were last year. I just think this is a little bit over the top, that's all.
Well, I think everyone's going to forget about it and should have already forgotten about it because who cares?
I'm sure this will be as well, especially if the Eagles are looking good in the preseason. Maybe they win their first game or two. I'm sure it'll be quickly forgotten.
If you're the head coach of the Eagles and someone says, Coach, how do you think the Eagles are going to do this year? How are they looking? What do you say?
I say based on everything that we've done through this offseason, I like the upgrades that we made, but we finally have a running back that I think I can count on and really hand the ball to help Carson. I like how Carson's developing. We are definitely going to be a better football team than we were last year. That's all I would say. It's nice to play simple.
You're going to be a playoff
nothing
team
over
coach?
the top.
You're going to be a playoff team coach?
I will let our play determine that.
Oh wow, you got the coach speak down, but I think the headline for that.
That's what you have to do, and
because that headline is Doug Peterson doesn't say Eagles are making the playoffs this year. That's the headline they're running with.
I don't know. Well, probably, but
Yeah, because you didn't say you're making the playoffs.
let
You
me
said,
just
I don't know.
let me just say this. I'd rather have that headline than this
No,
headline.
you wouldn't. I promise you, you wouldn't.
Okay.
I promise you.
I guess
Unless
I'm in
you
the
like
minority then here.
media to be on fire.
Well, I think the other the other factor with this, Alex, is everyone's making. I don't think it's as bad as this, but they're trying to draw the comparisons to the Vince Young Dream Team comments in 2011, and of course the Eagles didn't have that great a season. They finished 8-8 that year. I don't think those comments are as bad as that, but they're still a little bit over the top for me. That's all.
I think there's a difference. There's a difference between Dream Team and what Peterson said.
Yeah.
But, all right, understood.
Yes. All right, so let's move on now. We're staying in the NFC East, and we're going to go back to the Redskins situation, Alex. Of course, Kirk Cousins is going to become the first quarterback ever in league history to play on 2 straight franchise tags. He's going to make $34 million this year, as another long-term deal doesn't get done. Bruce Allen comes out in the media and says yesterday they offered Kirk Cousins $53 million guaranteed. Supposedly a 5-year deal, and also including $72 million guaranteed in injury money. And then he also says he never got an offer back from Kirk Cousins and his agent. So let's just start right there. The fact you already threw him under the bus is already just to me a slime ball move. I'm going to go out and perfectly say that.
Yep.
And now, if that weren't bad enough, this is where Bruce Allen loses all credibility to me if he didn't lose it already in the first place. And I know especially with you, Alex, it sounds like he referred to call Kirk Cousins as Kurt with a T several times during the press conference. I think that speaks for itself right there.
Yeah, that's the part I don't really care about a lot because that's just a dumb thing to talk about. But like I said, the fact that right after the deal didn't get done, which people thought they were going to get the deal done. I don't know why they thought that.
I don't know why either.
I mean, you had people saying they're going to get their contract done. It was never going to happen. Right after that, in Washington, Bruce Allen comes out with a statement saying this is the contract we offered. That is not to be transparent. That is not to act in good faith. That is a scheme, and yes, a scheme.
Yeah, it's a total slime ball move.
To hate Kirk Cousins, and that is the worst thing that you can do. I mean, you see the difference between Washington and Pittsburgh. When Pittsburgh's deal doesn't get done, Colbert releases a very generic statement saying, we'll sign the tag, we'll try again next year, versus Washington, which is, this is what happened, everyone go yell at Kirk Cousins. And this is why a deal is not getting done, because Washington's trying to game the system and win in such an absurd way that, Washington assumes that Kirk Cousins and his agent are stupid, and newsflash, they're not. And this is why it's just going to be Kirk Cousins, last year in Washington, or at least he's never going to sign a long-term deal with them, because there's no trust there. Washington is not acting in good faith, and you're not going to get a deal done that way.
Exactly. Kirk Cousins, I'll make sure I'm not saying Kurt.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins has all of the leverage here, clearly. But just going back for the fan dynamic for a second here, this just truly shows you how truly stupid that Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder are, is that they think that they've won this battle with the fan base, where the fan base has hated them since day one. And especially after what they did to Scott McLaughlin, when they made matters worse, and now, of course, they make matters worse again with this whole Kirk Cousins situation. So they're totally beyond naive if they even think they have even a shadow of any good faith with the fan base right now.
Yeah, it's another miscalculation by Washington, many of them happening in the Dan Snyder era. It's dumb, and it just shows the type of organization that Washington is and why they are one of the most hated and not respected. And you can be hated, but if you have respect, you can make it work. Look at New England, Tom Brady. People hate the Patriots, but they're respected. There's
Absolutely.
no denying that. Washington, there's hate and there's no respect, and it's a toxic environment to be in.
Yeah, no question about that, too. And, of course, when you look at this from Kirk Cousins' standpoint, there's a reason why he probably didn't come up with a counter offer. He doesn't want to be there. Lewis Riddick said it perfectly yesterday on ESPN. If he wanted to be there, they would have gotten the deal done.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would have been on a negotiable personality and coming back with a counter offer and things like that. The fact that there was no counter offer tells you all you need to know.
Yep, you're totally right.
So now we'll continue to stay in the NFC East now, Alex, and we go to Ezekiel Elliott, who again finds himself in trouble with the law. Allegedly involved in a bar incident in Dallas on Sunday, and then it comes out yesterday that now he is appealing a ticket for driving over 100 miles an hour on a Dallas highway. So that is obviously this kid hasn't shown that he's learned. And there was a quote by his father. I don't have the exact words in front of me, but it basically references saying, how he wasn't really sure how Elliott would be able to transition to having the fame of an NFL player, especially for an iconic franchise like the Dallas Cowboys. Being out, he just likes to have fun and be around people, and he was worried about that. And this came out during the draft, if you remember, Alex. Now, I know this is going to sound like hindsight's 2020, but if you're the Cowboys and you have all these scouts and you're doing all your due diligence with these high draft picks, which of course Zeke Elliott was, he was a top 5 pick, and you see his own father say something like that in the media, that should be an automatic red flag. I don't care how talented the guy is, and they still brought him in. So, let me throw that to you first, Alex. Would that have been the case for you, or how do you think if you were if you're looking at Ezekiel Elliott as a draft pick back from a couple years ago, how that would have affected your decision making?
I mean, something to take into consideration is the draft. We take everything into consideration, but I mean, it's hard to ignore the on-field talent, and I think it's well worth the risk. And honestly, even if Zeke gets hit with a 1-game suspension, it's worth it because of the immense talent that he has, what he did for your team last year, what it'll do for your team in the future. So something you have to consider, sure, but honestly, it wouldn't prevent me from drafting him.
It would have been a pretty big red flag for me. Honestly, because that just if it's bad to me, if it's bad enough that his own father were to go out and say something, that to me is a pretty major red flag that would almost, if not, prevent me from picking him.
But then you watch him on tape dominate.
I know. It's not an easy decision. I mean, we saw that this year with the Bengals selecting Joe Mixon, even though obviously that's a much more egregious situation than this is, at least for now. But I don't know if I see something like that coming from a family member in public, that would worry me a great deal, no matter how much talent I see on tape, which obviously was immense and undeniable, let's just face it. So my other issue with this is I'm not a fan of what Jerry Jones had to say yesterday, saying, he's just a kid, he's got to get used to the spotlight, things like that. You look at Carson, well, I'm just going to take Carson Wentz just for an example, just because it's easy, and he was a number 2 pick last year. You're not seeing him getting into trouble. You're seeing him being a good hunting boy, hunting geese, and now he's off being quiet, doing, just keep studying film, and he brought his teammates out. He's being a leader. He brought his teammates out to North Dakota for a little get-together and do some work a little bit before training camp, and he's being a leader. Zeke Elliott is in a spot where he needs to start being a leader now, too, because of that talent that we're talking about here. So you don't, in fact, need a posse like the Cowboys did with Des Bryant a few years ago to keep you out of trouble. So the way that the Cowboys, to me, have handled this, and it starts with Jerry Jones, to me, really is a total disaster.
Disaster is probably not the right word for Zeke's case. Obviously most of these rookies and most of the players in the league are good dudes, and that doesn't get talked about as much as it should be. It doesn't bring the ratings that the negative, press and bad things that happen do. And that's commendable, and that's great for any rookie that does things the right way, handles himself like a professional. I mean, that's awesome. But you understand not every single guy, when you're 20-something, people are going to make mistakes. Some guys will, some guys won't. It's about how you react from it. That's kind of what I care about more. It's just how do you learn from it, what do you take from it, and how do you make changes in your life, which I agree Zeke probably needs to do at this point to be better. And
better do it quickly.
Yeah, and do it quickly and not put yourself in those situations again. So, I'm fine with what Jerry said. You're not trying to kill the kid. I mean, he didn't, he did some dumb things, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Hopefully you learn from it, and maybe that's just the way Zeke is. Some guys need tough love, some guys need coddling. Maybe Zeke's just someone that responds better when you coddle him a little bit. I don't know.
If I'm involved with the Cowboys, you obviously have to be really frustrated with how Zeke's handled himself off the field. I mean, it's just been one thing after another. You have the domestic violence incident, which the NFL is still looking into. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. Then you have him pull the woman's top down at the parade. Then you have these 2 incidents. I mean, you really have to worry about him off the field going forward here if he can't find a way to get his act together.
He's definitely got to make some changes. I haven't followed every situation with him super closely, so it's hard for me to comment on, if the suspension's justified or not, and how long it could be, and all that stuff. But hopefully, make some changes in his life, and just because Jerry Jones and the Cowboys say what they said publicly, privately they could be saying, and hopefully are saying something different, being a little bit sterner to him. I like to take the approach of praise in public, criticize in private, and I think criticizing him publicly has its own downside as well, and something I personally would try to do very often.
So if you're head coach Jason Garrett here in this situation, do you find any sort of discipline in keeping him off the field in any sort of way, whether you keep him out of a game or anything like that? And especially, too, when you have Jerry Jones, who probably would say no to that.
No. Well, yeah, first of all, it's not about Jason Garrett. It's what Jerry Jones wants.
Right, exactly. But
no, I wouldn't do that because I think the league's going to do that for him. The league's going to come down with probably some sort of punishment. I guess like a short suspension. He serves his time, and he comes back. So, no, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's true. I do realize that the NFL will take care of that in itself. I'm just curious, if you're the head coach, is there anything, I guess, you can do to maybe, I guess, in terms of sending or anything like that? But obviously, your answer to that would be no. So let me ask you now, Alex, about how the NFL has handled this with Ezekiel Elliott, because we know on the legal side of things, the domestic violence issue was already dismissed in court for lack of evidence, and the ex-girlfriend didn't want to cooperate with the court, which I don't understand. And so that's now dismissed. But the NFL is still looking into it. And now they're saying they're looking into this other incident that happened at the bar, obviously as they should. So, getting back to what happened last year, Alex, with the domestic violence incident, I guess one would be what is left to investigate if it's not in the court system any longer, and two, is the NFL now, which I think they are, I think they're overthinking everything now, based on ever since the Ray Rice issue occurred. To me, the way that they're constantly dragging all these issues out, it hasn't just been with Ezekiel Elliott, it's been with Greg Hardy, etc., where they made a policy saying first-time offender is 6 games, and then the fact that they really have been inconsistent with that, and they've been dragging along all of these investigations. If you're Roger Goodell, I mean, something has to be done.
Is that Goodell calling you?
Yeah, it is Goodell calling me. Hang on one sec. I gotta take this.
Okay.
So I guess my point in all this, Alex, is that with the way the NFL's just handled this whole domestic violence thing, just from the Ray Rice thing to now in the present with Zeke Elliott and etc., is they just gotta they have to learn. Take it like the players do when they make mistakes on the field. You learn from it and you move on. Don't keep dwelling on what you did wrong in the past and all the media backlash that you took. Once something is done, move on to the next thing, and don't keep dragging things like this out. And then all of a sudden, we come out with like a wimpy 1 or 2 game suspension. Now, the one thing that does help the NFL in this situation is they've already said that they're investigating this other incident that happened on Sunday. So who really knows how much the domestic violence factor played into this, which most likely is going to be a 1 to 2 game suspension in combination with this incident that happened on Sunday. But I'm just saying overall, the NFL still has a problem when addressing its players off the field.
Sure, it's really about consistency and trying to be as immediate as possible with coming to a conclusion, and that can be tough with court systems and having to let those things play out. I get that, although just as a reminder, the NFL does not have to walk step for step with the courts. The courts can drop charges, and the NFL can still punish. The NFL is not a
right.
court system. They can do things however they please based off any criteria that they have. But yeah, this on again, off again, because we've been talking about a Zeke suspension for basically since he got drafted. Is that going to be an impact? And for it to just kind of, you don't want it to be this trip of, okay, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, and then you finally, 18 months later, get a final resolution. That's probably the biggest problem the NFL's got to deal with right now.
Yeah, I totally agree there. And one other question I'll have, and then we'll move on to the Panthers, is from an on-the-field standpoint, Alex, if the Cowboys were to lose Zeke for the first 1 to 2 games, the Giants come to town week 1 for the Sunday night game, and then they go to Denver week 2. How do you think that would play out for the Cowboys without a Zeke Elliott in the backfield?
They still have Darren McFadden, who's behind that line, is I think going to do well. the line's taking a bit of a hit. I know they're moving Lael Collins to right tackle. That's going to be a bit of an experiment. Could you imagine Lael Collins versus Von Miller? That's going to be a fun way to start that off. Yes. But it's not gonna. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna ding them. But I don't know if I would change my opinion of a win-loss to a loss because of it. I don't know. I'd have to think about it more, I guess. We'll see what happens. We'll see what the suspension is. I don't know what the suspension is going to be. Because initially, it felt like it was a short suspension. Now I'm hearing stuff that it might be longer, so I have no idea how it's going to go.
I would say just from taking those 2 games alone, I would give them a split. I would give them actually more of a chance to beat the Giants at home than I would going on the road to Denver and facing that defensive line, because I think without Zeke there, I think, as you mentioned, guys like Von Miller, etc., can come in there and swarm it up and make life a little bit more difficult for Dak Prescott in that offense. But I think they very well can go 0-2 as well. But I don't. But I think bottom line is I don't see a 2-0 start from the Cowboys if they lose Zeke Elliott. They have a better chance, obviously, to have that happen than not if he's not in there. I'm sorry. One other quick question I have for you, Alex, regarding the Cowboys. Just their whole offseason in general has been a mess with everybody getting arrested. And we're talking about Elliott here. Well, the Cowboys already with a decimated defense from guys not returning from free agency. Now they've already lost David Irving for a 4-game suspension because of the PED violation. So, as the Cowboys in general, if you're head coach Jason Garrett, what's your whole mindset in dealing with all this? Besides, obviously, wanting to get back on the field ASAP.
It's tough, no doubt about it. You're trying to juggle all these situations. But, you just got to plug for it. Cowboys still have a good team. Still going to be the favorites in the NFC East. And I think the fact that they can deal with all this garbage and all these suspensions and stuff like that and still come out ahead looking like the best team, says a lot about the overall structure of the roster.
I think most of it comes on the offensive end, but I'm not as high on the Cowboys as I mentioned before, as I am as most people are, just because I think that defense is really going to hinder them a little bit. I think they have the ability with that offense to win a lot of shootout games, but eventually that's going to come back and bite you where it hurts. So I think I still see them being around a 10-win team, but I just think the Giants are still a stronger team. They're much stronger defensively, where I think I would put them right now as the favorites for the NFC East.
I don't know about that offense, though. Is the run game going to be better? I mean, the pass game will be a little better with Evan Ingram, but Eli Manning is turnover-less. I don't know. I still have the Cowboys as a favorite, as a 11-win team or so.
And then finally, Alex, we're going to Carolina as they fire Dave Gettleman, their GM, a week before training camp starts. Just a bizarre time for that to happen. And they have also brought back the GM that was there before.
Martin Hurney.
And Martin Hurney. So, what was your first reaction to this, Alex, when you saw we saw it happen in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago as well, and that was a big mess. And now you have Marty Hurney coming back in here as a guy that was in there before. It seems like a weird dynamic to me. And also you had thrown the factor too that apparently Gettleman was not well liked by the players, as you saw the tweets by Steve Smith and D'Angelo Williams. So this is the weirdest kind of vibe I'm getting from a GM getting fired this late into the offseason.
Sure, very, very unusual right before camp for a move to be made. It's just a reminder, though, that being a GM is not all about just drafting good players and, identifying talent. It's being a people person and being able to wear every single hat.
Definitely.
That's a tough thing to do, and Gettleman was kind of painted as a no-nonsense, it's a business kind of thing, which can be useful, but it's going to have its consequences, too. And clearly there were a large group of players that didn't like him. Now, some did defend him. Michael Orr, for example, that's important to point out, to be fair. But just a reminder, the GM is all about, like anything, when you're working with a team, is about being a good people person.
And that's a great point you make, Alex, because really, when you look at the Panthers roster from top to bottom, there's a young, energetic vibe to this team, obviously with Cam Newton at the heart of it. And sometimes personalities like that, though, I think Gettleman was some of the things obviously worked because they were in the playoffs 3 out of the last 3 of his 4 years that he were there, including a Super Bowl appearance. So obviously something had to work for that short of time, but eventually, as we've seen before, relationships get tethered quickly in the front office, and then these things happen. But when the players are saying as much as they have, except for what you mentioned, Alex, then that's got to tell you something else. And I think when you measure what the kind of personality that Gettleman brings, and then the young personality that the whole team is, you can kind of see where the ends didn't meet the means.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I think you said that well. And there's been missteps, too. There's the Greg Olsen situation that might have been a mess. I don't think Gettleman wanted to do a deal with him.
Josh Norman, too, and now Thomas Davis, which now Hurney wants. Apparently, that's the first thing that he wants to do is make sure they lock up Thomas Davis, which was something that Gettleman didn't want to do, and that's one of the reasons why he also got the pink slip.
Yeah, so it's unusual. Definitely less than ideal situation, but I guess it's better to if they thought Jeremy Richardson really thought that it was an issue and it was going to create a lot of problems, it's better to get out now than go through the whole season with it being an issue and not fixing it until maybe it's too late.
Now, what you just said, Alex, just get it out now, get it done now. Why didn't that now come after the season and not at this point in the season? Other than the justifiable factor that obviously they had all that playoff success.
It's a fair question to ask. I don't know. Maybe the way that Gettleman reacted to Greg Olsen's comments, was the last straw. I don't know for sure why it happened. Obviously, these things don't usually happen this late, but I guess Richardson came to the realization that it wasn't going to work. It's hard to say.
I mean, even though I'm a person, if you know something's going to happen, don't wait. Don't have something be the last straw. Just take care of it now. I still understand that. Sometimes you're willing to let some of those tips go, and then of course, one big thing happens, and then something blows up, and then somebody gets fired. I understand that happens. That's just human nature. That's just how the way it works. Even though it may not be ideal for anybody to deal with, but now that we've seen all this backlash come out, I mentioned the D'Angelo Williams tweet, the Steve Smith tweet. We talked about the kind of the young dynamic that core that this team has had, led by Cam Newton. That's, I guess, why I would ask why this didn't happen earlier, basically.
Yeah, it's a fair question.
Factors afterwards. I realize it's hindsight, but...
No, it's a very fair question to ask. I mean, obviously, I can't provide an answer with you. No one wants to make these big front office changes a week before camp opens up.
And Ron Rivera seemed pretty dumbfounded, too, as he was given... He
said he didn't know.
He said I'm the wrong person to ask. Right, so...
Happened. Yeah, not the best way to unveil this, but Panthers, would still be okay.
Normally, when something like this happens, Alex, I would sincerely question where a certain franchise would stand heading into a season, but because of the way the players, obviously, majority of the players reacted to the way as strongly as they did against him, then I don't think that this is really going to affect the Panthers on the field really that much as they start the season. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And again, if Gettleman was having all these problems and not, working with the players and it was creating an issue, then it may be all for the best. Maybe not in the short term, but definitely in the long term. So we'll see who they bring in next year to be their GM. They know they can start the search now, and they don't have to. It's not going to be a guessing game of if they're going to have a new GM or not.
Yeah, that's exactly true. It's just weird bringing back somebody that you fired, but you never know because
it's just no time to go vet a new guy.
Right, that too, and you never know with things like this, as you've seen in other sports, where GMs that get fired come back and they gain a different perspective, and maybe that helps. But I don't know exactly where that will end up for the Panthers in the long run here. But I tell you what, we're talking about these certain NFL teams that are just ready to be done with the offseason and get ready to get on the field based on these off-the-field incidents that happen. Well, same thing for us, Alex. This is obviously, we're starting wrapping things up here for this week, and been all controversial issues and not really a whole lot of on the field. But we get to talk about on the field next week, Alex, because both the Eagles and Steelers report to training camp. Eagles rookies report Monday. First day of practice is Wednesday. What's the schedule for the Steelers, Alex? I do not remember off the top of my head.
I have to look. I think they report Thursday, and first practice is next Friday, I believe.
And also, Alex, we'll be looking forward to you getting some quick or best knowledge perspective, first-hand perspective, as you will be heading back to Latrobe this summer. Are you excited?
Yep. Always excited. My favorite time of year.
More summer of McChickens?
I got to slow them down. They're going to kill me. I got to get lettuce wrap McChickens maybe. Go a little healthier option.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend the chicken chalupa either. If there's a taco, I don't think there's a Taco Bell there near St. Vincent, though.
I don't think there is. All right. Yeah, good episode, though.
Yeah. Good to be back. Good to get the show back together again. Always look forward around this time of the week, usually midweek. And, of course, before, as we've talked about before, If you guys have any questions, Eagles related, Steelers related, NFL related, make sure to shoot them at us. Alex is at Twitter at Alex_Kozora. I'm at Twitter at M.Catrillo. The podcast is on Twitter. Make sure to give that a follow at FF Podcast 1. That's at FF Podcast 1. And you can find all of the show archives on our YouTube channel, which is at Football Friday. You can also find all of the show links at the Twitter page as well, and all of our personal Twitter pages too. And one other big announcement, Alex, that I must make, and those who didn't see it on Twitter already, is I am officially moving on from Redskins coverage on Pro Football Spot, and I am now officially an Eagles contributor. I'm very, very excited about that. I have to give a shout-out to Russell Baxter, who we had on the show here a couple months ago. Hopefully we'll get him back at some point here during the season, for giving me my start at PFS. I really enjoyed my time and getting some Redskins talk. I was looking forward to working with him a little bit more, but obviously when this Eagles opportunity came up, I obviously couldn't pass on that. So very excited to be formally covering the Eagles in some sort of way besides on here, and so we're looking forward to getting into that. But the Redskins coverage won't stop, obviously, with them being the NFC East, and of course if Bruce Allen keeps doing stupid stuff like this, we're still going to talk about him. So any Redskin fans that did follow in this format or on me on Twitter and Pro Football Spot, I do thank you for that, and hopefully you'll continue to follow me for the latest NFL coverage. So good to be doing that, Alex. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, good job, man.
So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. For Alex Kozora, I'm Matt Catrillo. Thanks for listening to the Football Friday podcast.